Hello and welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi. My name is James.
My name is Matt.
And today's episode is a bonus episode. It's an isolation special because of the state of things at the moment in the world.
Yeah, we are coming to you from lockdown London. Sound quality might be a little bit different to what you expect from our fine production quality normally, because we are video calling each other in isolation from different ends of London.
We are social distancing. Definitely. It's very important at the moment. So yeah, we're making sure that we're doing that. We did a poll on Twitter to try and decide which film we were going to look at in today's bonus episodes, because we thought we'd take a bit of a break from the main series, because obviously we've got a few already in the can, so those will be coming out in the next few weeks. But we thought it was important to do an episode sort of like talking a little bit about what's going on at the moment.
So we might have a few more episodes like this coming to you, as we might need to record remotely in the future, depending on how long this crazy situation goes on for.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So in the Twitter poll, the choice of films were, which ones did we have, Matt?
We had A Quiet Place, Life Force, Cube, and 10 Cloverfield Lane, which won by a nose.
Yeah, it was really close. So thank you everyone who voted on the poll in Twitter. I'm sure we'll be doing plenty more polls to keep ourselves occupied during this lockdown time, so keep a lookout for that. But yeah, so today's episode is all about 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah, so 10 Cloverfield Lane. I saw this film. I don't think I'd seen it for a couple of years. I saw it whenever it came to Netflix recently, a couple of years ago, and I kind of forgot a lot of it. Watching it again, I can kind of see why it won the poll that we put up. It's very appropriate for how we're all living at the moment, and I can see why people would want to have a chat about this film.
Definitely, it's very appropriate for what's going on in the world at the moment. So I like, do you remember all the hype about this when it first came out?
Not really, no. This one passed me by a little bit.
Yeah, because it was another one of these. So J.J. Abrams sort of produced it, didn't he? And his company Bad Robot. Yeah. So they were responsible for Cloverfield previously, I believe. Is that right? Yeah,
the first one was, that was quite a while before this one, wasn't it? It was 2008, and it was directed by Matt Reeves. I don't really know Matt Reeves, but J.J. Abrams produced that one.
Yeah, because I know the release of Cloverfield was a bit of a sort of like a secret release, like a mystery release, because J.J. Abrams is really famous for doing that kind of thing. Yeah. So what he did with Cloverfield was they showed it in cinemas before Transformers, the big Michael Bay film.
Okay.
And it was really mysterious. You didn't really know what was going on. It was they showed like because obviously the original Cloverfield film is all found footage, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it started with like the party scene, and then suddenly this like big attack's happening, and then that's like a snippet of the film that they showed. So it was very mysterious. Nobody really knew what this big monster film was. So they did a similar thing for this film as well. So again, a Michael Bay film. They had trailers before 13 Hours, which was out at the time. And this was sort of like January in the sort of like the year it was released. And so they had the trailers, and then it came out in March. So that's quite a quick promo time. So like doing the trailers before and then going straight into March with the actual release of the film. Again, nobody really knew what the film was going to be about. It was like clear that there was some people in the bunker, something was going wrong, and then it came up with Cloverfield at the end of it. So everybody knew it was sort of linked to that previous franchise. So again, the hype built, and then it sort of snowballed after that.
So no one goes into the cinema watching this film not knowing, because I wanted to talk about this a little bit. It is called 10 Cloverfield Lane. Do you think that kind of presents a bit of a problem for what the film is trying to do in the first sort of 40 minutes or so? Because it's a Cloverfield film. And that's evident from the name, you know that going in. So whatever's happening, we know that it's set in a movie universe where a giant sort of half squid, half Godzilla monster is capable of tearing up New York City.
Yeah.
I don't think we know when this is set at the start of the film, in terms of, the first film. But that's the universe it's set in, right? So I guess what I'm getting at is there's some tension in the first half of the film where Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character, Michelle, is suspicious of John Goodman's character, Howard, who's got her in this bunker, says he saved her life, and he says that something apocalyptic has happened up on the surface. She's not totally bought into that story. I don't know, do you think that there's a bit of a problem with the fact that the title has Cloverfield in it? Because we know that universe has, massive monsters destroying cities in it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, because it's going to have something to do with the alien presence that's in Cloverfield, because it's in the name. That's part of the franchise now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, because I kind of expected something like that to happen when I was watching it. But they're very clever in this film so it wasn't actually supposed to be a Cloverfield film originally. Do you know much about sort of that side of things?
I know it was adapted from just a completely unrelated script, but I don't know if that original script basically had giant Cloverfield type monsters in it or not. Yeah. And I really wonder about that, if they just completely wedged in the Cloverfield element.
I think they did. I'm pretty sure that J.J. Abrams came along and was like, right, we've got this really good script. If we add in this Cloverfield element, then it's just going to hype it up even more and sort of like get that sort of marketing presence that they needed for the release of the film.
Yeah, so that's what it boils down to, is that they wanted the kind of they needed to sell tickets, right?
Yeah.
Like there's that tension that about halfway through the film, Michelle almost escapes. She kind of makes a break for it, and then because she doesn't believe Howard, and then she sees like a woman with like rotting flesh or whatever that kind of, she's desperate to get into the bunker, and it all fits into Howard's narrative, and then she suddenly believes him, and the route of the film changes completely. Presumably in the original script, up until that point in the film, you don't know if there's been a disaster or not. You're completely in Michelle's kind of point of view of everything.
Yeah, and I think even knowing that it was a Cloverfield film, when I first watched it, I still didn't know what would happen, because you don't know, like you said, you don't know when it's set. You don't know if it's set before this sort of like alien invasion, or if it's after the alien invasion, or if it's during. There's that sort of element to it as well.
Yeah, and there's still complete mystery around it, which is J.J. Abrams' kind of whole thing. And the first two films just ask a load of questions that don't get answered, basically. Even the monsters that we do see in this film don't really look a great deal like the monster that destroys New York in the first film. It's all just throwing a load of new concepts in, and kind of building up that mythos and not really answering any questions.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? But did you enjoy the film though?
I love it. I think it's really, really good. Yeah.
It's brilliant, isn't it? I think there's so much going on in this film, and the pacing's brilliant. It's tightly formulated. There's so much in there that, again, we always talk about films that reward repeat viewings. This is definitely one which you can watch again and again. You'll be like, oh, they sort of like, they did that bit beforehand to like foreshadow this, and there's this bit and there's this shot, so you know something's coming. It's so clever.
Yeah, and it's built around two central performances, which, when you've got, John Goodman is a phenomenal actor. He's such what's the word? He's just one of those actors that's really hardworking, appears in an absolute ton of things, and always puts in a great performance. Mary Elizabeth Winstead I really like her as well. She's a bit of a scream queen, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. She is
Yeah, but she is, though. That's kind of like how she got a big break, isn't it? Because she did the Final Destination film, didn't she?
Did she? Which one was she in? The third one?
I think she might have been, you know?
Yeah, which was a good one.
Yeah.
She always plays she's very good at playing resourceful final girls, you know? That seems to be her niche, and she kind of gives that sort of performance in this.
Yeah, because I always forget that she's in Scott Pilgrim as well.
Yeah.
It's like, it's one of those, because you recognize her as soon as you see her, but I feel like in every film she's in, she's very different. She doesn't come across the same sort of character, even though she does it's that sort of final girl character. She's she gives a bit of something different each time.
Yeah, I think she's definitely capable of playing a very diverse range of roles. I think in the kind of sort of early 2010s, she did get cast into a bit of a horror niche, I think. I don't know. But, she is good at it, and she's great in this film. I think one of the things I like so much about it is that all of the characters, there's only 3 characters, and only 2 of them are really main characters. But your big 3, Howard, Michelle, and Emmett, they're all quite smart, They're really good to watch in such a confined, tense space because they're all really smart. They're all quite resourceful. Even Emmett has his moments of Emmett, who's he's introduced as a little bit of a hick, I think, but he does sort of prove himself to be able, he's able to think on his feet and talk his way out of situations. It doesn't work out for him, but he is shown to be able to do that. And obviously Howard and Michelle, actually quite similar characters in their kind of resourcefulness and intuitive sort of cleverness that it's really entertaining to sort of pit them against each other in this sort of a situation.
And they're all really fleshed out as well. They seem like real people. Like they're not sort of like sometimes you get characters in some of these sci-fi films which are a bit, or horror films as well, because this is a sci-fi horror really. The whole sort of Cold War element to it as well. I think that brings it more into the sort of like sci-fi realm, because it is like a Cold War film, isn't it? They're scared of some sort of nuclear threat, and they're sort of all bunkered down. So there's that side to it as well.
Yeah, from a sci-fi point of view, it reminds me more of a lot of the films we were watching in our first series on AI, where you can take a sort of central, inherently sci-fi concept, which is kind of the root of the situation or scenario of the film, but then you build out around that in a very just naturalistic way, and the kind of interactions that people have. It's just a very human story, but the characters have been thrown together because of this sci-fi concept, which in this film is, an alien invasion or whatever the hell the Cloverfield things are.
Yeah, because there's Cloverfield paradox as well, isn't there? And then it gets all confusing there, like it's some sort of dimensional thing. I mean, I don't know what was going on in that. Have you seen it?
I've seen it. It wasn't very good. It was all right, but it was very interesting because I get a bit annoyed at J.J. Abrams for doing this whole mystery box bullshit where he just sort of builds up the mystery and more questions get asked than answered. But then if you take these 3 films as an example of his style of doing things, the first 2 are great, and the third one where they do try to answer a load of questions, it's just a mess. So there's a lot to be said for just keeping things a weird mystery.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of like what you need to do with these kind of films, really.
So they are interdimensional monsters, aren't they? They're not aliens, and there's some sort of science experiment.
I lose track. But the other film this reminded me of, another film which John Goodman's in, which I watched recently. So like during this whole lockdown period, I've been going through so many films. I watched like 10 films last week alone. And I signed up for the, so if you go on Prime, you can sign up for like a 7-day trial of the Arrow channel. So you can get all those cult films on there. So I've literally just been rinsing those. But one of the films I watched was called Matinee, and it stars John Goodman. And in that, it's all set during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And you've got this panic that's happening around the town because everyone's scared of this imminent nuclear threat. So they've got scenes where they're going to supermarkets and they're taking toilet roll.
Oh my God.
And they're grabbing cans and they're sort of like frantically going around. And in the midst of that, there's John Goodman, who plays like a kind of Alfred Hitchcock character, who's got a new sci-fi B movie coming out. And it's like he's got this new way of doing films. It's kind of like 4D almost. So during the screening, he's got like a rumble machine, and that goes a bit out of control during the film. And then he's got an actor who comes out dressed as this. So basically, the film that he's doing is called Mant, and it's kind of like a sort of harking back to those sci-fi B movies of the 50s. And so it's called Mant, and then this guy dressed up as the Mant comes out halfway through. And I kept thinking of that during this because they're so sort of close in what they're talking about, because in that they've got a bunker as well. And that's what made me think about the sort of the Cold War ideas that are sort of like going through in both these films.
Yes, the atomic bomb is terrible. But more terrible still are the effects of atomic mutation. Hello, I'm Lawrence Woolsey. And I want to warn you about something that could happen. Something that does happen in my newest motion picture. Observe the ant. A miniature marvel of social cooperation and prodigious strength. But if a man and an ant were exposed to radiation simultaneously, the result would be terrible indeed. For the result would be Mant.
Yeah, I think Howard's kind of scarred by that history of America. Like, he hasn't moved on from that Cold War, build a bunker in your garden mentality. But I wanted to talk about him as a character because he obviously hasn't moved on from that. And he's obviously a complete weirdo.
He's so weird.
But he's got it right. You know?
Yeah.
I think rewatching it this week with everything that's going on in the world, like, I don't think I appreciated the first time how clever he is as a character. He's smart. He's well prepared. He's a psycho. And he is presumably kidnapping and murdering young women. We don't quite get confirmation on that, but pretty much confirmed. But watching it again, like, well, he's got it all right. He's stocked up. He's ready for the apocalypse. Like, how did you feel watching someone how do you think he would be coping in the world now?
I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because all of these sort of survivalists, you kind of like poo-poo them and you're like, you're being ridiculous, this is never going to happen. And then something like this happens and suddenly you're like, oh, I need to go to the shops and get 500 toilet rolls and panic buy and then buy loads of cans and frozen food. And it's like, it's weird because he is clearly nuts, this guy. I mean, you go through sort of like a real twist and turn with his story, because this is what speaks to John Goodman's performance, because at one minute you're kind of like, oh, he's actually all right, and he's sort of like saving her from all this, and sort of he's looking out for her best interests. And then the next minute he's shooting someone and you're like, oh no, he is actually mental.
Yeah.
It's like, what is going on? The whole time you're kind of like on edge because he has this weird switch in his emotions all the time. And we don't know if it's because he's unhinged or if that's just him sort of like in the pressure of the confines of where he is at the moment. It's all a bit, it's very tense.
Yeah. Well, it's a great central concept, isn't it? That you get trapped in a bunker with the one guy that's ready for the apocalypse. But unfortunately, he's also a serial killer.
Yeah. I mean, guys, things might be bad at the moment, but at least they're not this bad. Like, yeah. I'm hoping nobody's like trapped in a bunker with any evil John Goodmans out there.
I sincerely hope not. And just remember that, no matter how much you might want a can of beans at this time, you probably don't want them enough to go into John Goodman's bunker.
I keep this door sealed at all times. No one comes in or out.
So it sort of like tiptoes around what he's actually done, doesn't it, throughout a lot of the film?
It does, but I think they kind of draw a line under it. So we never get like the 100% confirmation, but she's seeing a photo, and I think the circumstantial evidence, someone scratched help into a window, and there was blood in the scratchings.
That's pretty damning.
And he shoots Emmett dead. It is psycho behavior, and he's got a tub of acid for disposing of, what's he disposing other than bodies that he needs a tub of acid for?
Yeah, I don't know why you would have that acid kicking around in your bunker otherwise. But then it's kind of like, you could also look at it as he is doing this all to protect her, and he was genuinely worried that Emmett was going to cause some sort of problem down in the bunker.
Yeah, but what you've got there is a different kind of psychopath who is like, I'll murder a guy in cold blood for my make-believe family. Yeah.
But again, it's you wouldn't imagine John Goodman necessarily playing this character as well, because it's John Goodman, it's Sully from Monsters, Inc. And when I was talking to people about this before, they all remembered it as like, oh, the twist is that actually he's all right, he's a nice guy. And I was like, no, that is not the twist. And I know at least 2 people who've said that to me, and I was like, you're not remembering this film.
Oh wow.
And then I started doubting myself. I was like, wait, did I get it all wrong? And then I watched it again. I was like, no, definitely, he is evil.
Because that's the thing about knowing that it's a Cloverfield film, because if you don't know that it's a Cloverfield film, that is the big twist halfway through, is that, oh shit, Howard's right all along. We need to stay in the bunker, and then Howard goes weird, and then there's another twist. But obviously you kind of know that things are apocalyptic because it's a Cloverfield film, so you just move on to the bigger twist that he's right about the apocalypse, but he's also a murderer.
Yeah, exactly. And did you get the sort of like the Hitchcock vibe in this?
Not really, apart from there's, what do you mean by that? There's like tension in a small space.
Yeah, and it's kind of like they show you things before they happen. So the old Hitchcock thing where if there's a bomb, you show the audience the bomb under the table, so they know that, and they've got that sort of like threat element when they're watching it. The tension sort of builds.
Right. So what do we get in this one? So
in this, there's lots of like foreshadowing. The whole film is just sort of like foreshadowing what's going to happen later on. Like there's the whiskey bottle, which is the most obvious one. So the whiskey bottle that they show at the start.
She grabs a bottle of whiskey before she leaves.
Yeah, and then that's the same whiskey bottle that she finds in Howard's truck later on, which ends up saving her because she turns it into a Molotov cocktail and chucks it at the alien.
Yeah, and he also references it about halfway through the film, because not halfway through, but early on, he's like, oh, I got some of your stuff. I was able to grab some. Sorry, I didn't have time to grab the booze.
Yeah. So
we're reminded about it.
It's that. And then everything's constantly referring back to stuff. So you see the shower curtain lots. The shower curtain is constantly in shots, and it looks out of place, doesn't it?
It's quite a memorable design. It's like a bright sort of maroon with a huge rubber ducky on it, isn't it?
Yeah, with a little umbrella.
Yeah.
So you're always seeing that in shots, and then that becomes the hazmat suit later on that she sort of makes, and sort of like the design she's got in her house, the little fashion designs, they're all there. And because you've seen those previously, she has an interest in fashion design, and that becomes relevant later when she has to make the suit. And then there's things like the IV drip, which turns out to be the hook which she uses to push the shower curtain down the vent.
Yeah. She uses the hook at the start of the film to get her stuff from the other side of the room, and then later she's able to fish out. Yeah.
And there's like the vent as well, because she uses the vent right at the start to start the fire. And then later on she uses that same vent to hide the hazmat suit from Howard. So the film is constantly showing you stuff which is going to be useful later. So when you watch it, you're kind of like, okay, so this is what our surroundings are in this bunker. What are we going to be able to make use of? What is going to become important later down the line? So it's very clever.
Yeah, it's very tightly scripted. We're just, they've yeah, there's an element of they've mapped out the kind of geography of this bunker and then located the items within it and then just sort of built the story around that. And it works really well. And it's a surprisingly good use of space. Do you think this is a claustrophobic film?
It doesn't feel claustrophobic all the time because I feel like there's like elements of it. I feel like it's more the characters which are suffocating.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to the surroundings all the time because it's like it is a bunker. It is sort of like claustrophobic, but you don't feel too tight in some of those spaces.
No, it is a really good use of space. There's filmically a lot more space than there is within the story of it. And yeah, I think you're right. It's the characters that make it so tense. It's the performance of John Goodman. I think it's interesting that you think that you don't really see him as that. I think he has done a lot of like big, jolly, fat guy comedy roles, and a lot of people remember him for that. Like Roseanne, most people probably still think of him as the guy in Roseanne for 10 odd years or whatever. But that he's very good at like using his like size. He's got a really booming voice. You know, all of those things can become so intimidating and threatening. And he's obviously got, you know, as an actor, as a professional, he's got complete command of those tools of his trade. And yeah, he can turn it on, and he really does in this film.
Yeah, because he is intimidating and he's scary in all those shots you see of him. Like there's so many shots where he's just in doorways and he'll just appear all of a sudden when they're having a conversation and just be like I'm here, I can hear what you're talking about. Oh, one of the best moments was when they were playing that game.
Yeah.
And they're doing the and then he couldn't get the word woman because it was Little Women, wasn't it?
It's two great moments back to back, yeah.
When he's saying like girl, girl,
little
princess. It's like
child.
It's creepy, but that's how he views her.
Yeah. And then they go straight into his turn is the clues he's giving are like, I see you all the time. I see everything. I'm always watching you. I know what you're up to. And he's like yelling, and it's just, the tension is incredible.
Yeah.
And then Michelle gets it. The clue was Santa Claus.
Yeah, and she has to blurt
good.
it out, and then she goes, "Yeah, you get to keep the point because you should." And it's like, just so tense.
I don't know.
I know what you're doing. I see what you're doing. I know what you're up to.
Look, Howard, I don't know what you're getting at.
I see you when you're sleeping.
I
know what you're doing. And I'm always watching.
I don't know.
Always watching. I'm always watching.
Santa Claus. There's Santa Claus.
Him being such an imposing, scary guy is really important because there's a big, like, domestic violence theme. Again, you talked about like the way they'll show you something and it's going to come into play later. Similarly, we get some background information on Michelle. She's from an abusive home, right? Her dad was violent and abusive to her whole family, and that's her whole background. And now she's found herself living in Howard's little make-believe family, and he's an abusive parent in that, isn't he? He's a monster.
Yeah, because it is a lot about domestic abuse, isn't it? Because even when it starts, we don't know what her circumstances are, because I'd forgotten the intro of this film. Like that first opening scene, which we talked about with the whiskey bottle and everything, she's running away. So it's all sort of like there's no naturalistic sound. It's all just the theme music, and there's quick cuts of her on the phone and grabbing stuff. And when you're first watching it, you're kind of like, this is because she's running away from something Cloverfield related.
Yeah.
Because there's something's happening, so she's got to leave. But it turns out that it's she's running from this relationship and her fiance.
And again, we don't actually get told what the. We know that they've had an argument because we hear his kind of side of the story when she takes his phone call, but just ignores him. But he says, "Oh, we just had an argument, you know," but we don't quite know how serious that was and what really transpired. But we do know later on in the film that she is the kind of person who will pick up her things and walk away from an abusive relationship because she's grown up in that household. And unfortunately, she's gone straight into another one.
Yeah. Did you recognize the boyfriend's voice as well?
Not until the credits rolled.
Yeah, Bradley Cooper. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I didn't recognize it when I heard it, but then I was like, oh, there you go, little hidden cameo.
He must be mates with like J.J. Abrams or something, right? You're not going to pay Bradley Cooper money for 3 minutes of voice.
Nah, you wouldn't expect so, would you?
There was a bit of a weird thing with the whole like domestic abuse angle, which is that there's a big thing where like abusers will try and keep their victim locked into the relationship by sort of, implying or just outright telling them that it's worse out there. If you leave me, things are going to be worse for you. You're not going to, I'm looking after you. I'm protecting you. So you've got to put up with all the awful things that I do. And kind of like telling you that the world outside is dangerous for you, which is obviously what Howard is doing to Michelle throughout most of the film. But it's, I don't know, it's sort of weird. It's important for her to take control of the situation and overcome that and get away from him on her own terms. But it does slightly undermine things in that theme a little bit, because Howard is correct, right? Whether or not it's more dangerous for her outside than inside is a question, but it is objectively dangerous for her to be outside. There are interdimensional aliens. They're spraying some crazy green gas, and they're destroying cities. He's right. It is dangerous outside, but as a domestic abuser, he's kind of proved right. It's a bit weird. It doesn't quite track with that.
You can't leave. An attack means fallout, which contaminates the air above ground. That's how it works.
Well, how long do we have to wait until it's safe?
Depends on proximity to the closest blast, 1 year, maybe 2. And that's if we're talking about weapons that we know of. Russians are developing some nasty stuff, and if the Martians finally figured out a way to get here, their weapons will make the Ruskies look like sticks and stones. Luckily, I prepared for this.
So I guess the way they get away with that a little bit is the very last thing that she does. So the assumption that Howard has, or maybe even the desire that Howard has, is that she's a helpless little girl and he is uniquely qualified to protect her and be this father figure. We learn through the film that she's resourceful, she's tough, she's clever. It just through the fact that she's capable of escaping this psycho. That tells us a lot about the character. And then it's kind of confirmed in the final scenes that maybe things outside are less dangerous for her, because she decides to drive straight into Houston, doesn't she? She's like, she hears a call on the radio. Has anyone got any, medical experience, or if you are a survivor? Sorry?
It's like medical training or combat experience. I think it's something like
that. Yeah, that was it. Combat experience, because it's like, does she have combat experience, or is she just hearing that and thinking, well, I've just spent, 2 weeks in a bunker with a murderer, so that's my combat experience.
Yeah.
I'm fully qualified.
Definitely. That's definitely what they're saying at the end of that. But you're right. She's not a victim though, is she?
No, exactly. And maybe that's why it kind of manages to work with that domestic abuse theme, which is Howard's trying to make her think it's more dangerous outside. Yes, it is dangerous outside, but actually she is resourceful, she's clever, she's strong, she can handle herself, and it's less dangerous outside. She can be helpful to people. She might be, she can go and save lives out there maybe.
Yeah. And because even when you first see her, she's running away, so you might think that she's a bit sort of weak or something like that at that point, but then within the sort of first half an hour, whatever it is of the film, she's actively trying to escape. She finds out she's chained to the wall, and she gets the IV thing. She's properly ready to take on Howard when he comes through the door next, and then she starts to fire. That's the first thing she does. She's like, I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna survive.
Yeah, she's not a horror movie victim girl in that sense. As soon as she's given a tool of any kind, she starts whittling down her crutch into a sharp stick so she can attack him with it.
Yeah. And because like the resourcefulness, like the hazmat suit is the main thing that really shows that, I feel. Because what did you think of that as well? That entire concept of making a hazmat suit out of a shower curtain and what was it, like a bottle and then like some sort of weird filter thing?
She reads a magazine that says like how to make your own gas mask or something like that, which is believable that Howard would own something like that in his bunker, whether or not, like, I don't know, you must be able to build your own sort of, because all a gas mask is like, it's just a series of filters that go over your mouth, right? Those big sort of round things, they just filter air. So you can make a simple filter with like cotton wool and sheets of paper and stuff, I guess. So I think it's fairly believable, and you've got to take that kind of suspension of disbelief and just accept that she is a master seamstress, and capable of making airtight clothing out of a shower curtain. You just got to say like, oh, okay.
Well, I mean, funny thing as well, like related to what's going on now. So my girlfriend works as a pattern cutter. So she gets things to sort of like, she gets patterns sent to her so she can make clothing and stuff like that, and sort of like the blueprints. Someone sent her the blueprints to do a mask, like one of these face masks that everyone's wearing.
Oh,
so
God,
she did herself a nice little fashionable face mask.
She's going to become a millionaire then in the next few weeks, isn't she?
Lots of different patterns. They may not do exactly the job, given what the NHS have said. But yeah, new little marketing business there.
Has she seen this film?
Yeah. She was one of the people who thought that John Goodman was okay by the end of it.
All right, she needs to watch it again then.
So obviously, with the way things are at the moment, everyone's on lockdown. Everyone's at home trying to think of things to do. What did you think about all the things that they came up with to pass the time in this film? And how many of these have you done already?
Well, the main thing is that he's got a massive library of DVDs and VHS, which obviously is the main thing that would appeal about being in a bunker, right? That's what you want.
Yeah, it's the first thing. When he first shows them that room, that's the first thing I was looking at. All the DVDs and the VHSs. It's like amazing.
What I really liked was the fact that, I mean, how long do you think they're in there? It's like a matter of weeks or maybe even less than that?
Yeah, because they don't really have a timeline, do they? They do like a little montage of them passing the time. But yeah, we don't know.
But it's established pretty early that Emmett's done all the quizzes in like the magazines, like the personality quizzes that they do. They're just doing like jigsaws constantly. I don't know. I need better mental stimulation than like jigsaws and Monopoly.
But the jigsaw was so annoying because what was it? It was like a catfish, but it was like a cat looking into a fish bowl with a snorkel on, and then it was missing pieces. I mean, that makes me not want to do any puzzles because if I was missing a piece, that would drive me absolutely mental.
Yeah.
Just like Howard clearly is.
I like the kind of inherent frustration of that they would do a whole jigsaw in this lockdown situation and there's like 8 pieces missing, including the cat's eye.
But I love the jukebox as well. I mean, if you're going to play some tunes, you might as well have a massive jukebox in your bunker. That
was very elaborate, wasn't it? Like, even a sort of doomsday prepper, I find it a bit hard because it just the fact that it's so heavy, it's so big, it takes up so much room, it would take up a lot of power. Like, it's just not a good way of having music in your bunker, right?
I mean, the jukebox as well, another foreshadowing thing. They show that earlier. And then John Goodman does that amazing little dance after they've sort of just found out that he's basically a killer. And
he's twerking.
Yeah, he's doing a little twerk. It's so good. And he like dances up the stairs.
Again, it goes to what I was saying about like John Goodman's so aware of, like, as a good actor should be, just aware of his own body. And it's why he's a good comedic actor, because doing a little funny jiggle of your bum when you're a big, fat, older guy, like, you know, it's funny, it's cute, it's silly. And then kind of coupling that with his imposing, you know, threatening, menacing side. It's a really interesting mix. It works really well.
Yeah, John Goodman's just very good.
Yeah.
So going back to the domestic abuse sort of side of things again. So, you know, Damien Chazelle, who directed and wrote Whiplash, actually helped with rewriting this as well.
Oh, okay, I saw his name on the credits as a screenwriter.
Because I found that really interesting, given like Whiplash is about abuse, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's done here. Is he becoming the abuse guy? Like he will always write scripts or direct stuff about some form of abuse.
I don't know the rest of his work well enough, but it's interesting that he's able to, like, both of those films, like Whiplash is unbelievably tense, but in a kind of storyline where you just wouldn't really expect it. Like the tension in Whiplash is brilliant because if you describe the plot to someone, you wouldn't think, oh, that sounds like it's really tense. It's about a drummer who goes to drumming school. But it's amazingly done. And yeah, you're right. It's kind of the abusive father figure storyline that comes into it and drives a lot of that tension. So I guess he's got some skill there. Although you would have to assume that the original, if he wasn't there for the original scripting, then this original storyline, it was certainly a tense story, wasn't it? I wonder which bits he brought to it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out, wouldn't it? Because, yeah, you can definitely tell it's got some of his sort of like trademark stuff in there, because obviously he's so good at crafting those sort of tense moments and the sort of like switch in personalities and stuff like that and what that leads to. But like, whereas Whiplash is, it ends in quite like a dark way, this has a much more sort of light ending to it.
The ending's mad. I mean, the ending goes on for a lot longer than I remembered it. She's out of the bunker for a good, 10, 15 minutes, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
It's a good chunk of it. And it's really what kind of throws us back into the sci-fi setting. And I wonder if they kind of like levered in a bit more of that ending just to like really drive home, like, no, it's a Cloverfield film set in the Cloverfield universe. Don't worry, we are going to show you a good amount of interdimensional monsters at the very end of the movie.
I think a lot of people, well, there are a certain group of people which didn't like that ending, because obviously up until that point it's a tense, realistic thriller, and then that ending makes it a sci-fi, definitely. There's sort of no doubt about it by the end of it. But
we've seen the mutilated pigs, which I really like at the start of the film, because it sets up the kind of feeling of, well, Howard could have done that to those pigs. So there's a bit of mystery around it, but it could be this sort of apocalyptic threat. And then later on, we get the woman who's kind of covered in boils or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. That is like an apocalypse, like a post-apocalypse film.
Yeah. We're in this sci-fi world, and that is confirmed, even though when we're just sort of getting little drips of, what it might be. What's interesting is it doesn't really track with the first Cloverfield film. The monsters look different. They've got spaceships. I mean, the spaceships are the monsters as well, right?
Yeah, but then it might be sort of like the second wave, because this is again with the foreshadowing element. John Goodman calls it earlier in the film. He says it could be like aliens and mutant worms or something like that, and that's exactly what we see at the end. These weird like worm creatures.
It must be happening in parallel to the first film, because they're in a bunker and something terrible has happened. And none of them say, oh, maybe it's another one of those monsters like what happened in New York 8 years ago,
Yeah.
And similarly, when it happens in New York, no one's like, oh, maybe this is the same thing that shut down the southern seaboard, back when. So it has to be happening in tandem, right? But I don't know.
And again, like Cloverfield had that weird ending as well, because that ended with the start of the film, didn't it? With the beginning of the recording. And then you see them on the Ferris wheel, and then in the background, they've got the landing of the creature.
So it's not a landing of a creature. You have to play all the like alternate reality games that came out when Cloverfield came out. Apparently it's not. So that is not an alien crashing into Earth that then attacks New York. That is a meteorite crashing into Earth that wakes up a sleeping monster at the bottom of the ocean, comes and attacks New York, I think.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. So like I completely missed that then.
Yeah, you got to go in on all that stuff. Like,
Yeah, what is the sort of like the AR game stuff? Because I think they did it for this as well.
right. There's like a whole thing about Slusho, which is like a squishy from Simpsons. It's like a brand of like frozen drink.
Yeah, because this gets referenced in this, doesn't it? Like briefly. It's in the petrol station she goes to. There's that machine.
Slusho's on sale. And there was something about like, so I think Cloverfield, the first film, might have been called Slusho, like its sort of secret filming name or something like that. And then Slusho, the company that makes Slusho, I don't know, maybe they were doing some like deep sea mining or something like that, and they woke up the monster. If any of our listeners, I am certain that at least one of our listeners went in deep on all of the Cloverfield alternate reality games and stuff like that, the Cloverfield universe. Please get in touch, drop us an email, because God knows I don't want to go back and play all of those games or whatever it was that you had to do.
Just want to know the secret bits in there so we can find out more about the mythos.
Yeah, drop us a line. What was Slusho? What was the deal? Why was that relevant? Yeah, I'd love to know.
So the ending, it's definitely like a sort of sci-fi ending with all these sort of like, she's running around from these aliens, and again, all the foreshadowing comes in. To what extent do you think this film is like a superhero origin story? Because I've heard a few people say this as well about this. You could view it like that.
Do you mean in the way that that Michelle is now going to go off and be like this hero of the resistance, just like saving lives and throwing bombs into monsters and stuff like that?
Yeah, because I feel like it's kind of got those elements to it, because in all these superhero origin stories, something really bad happens to them, and then they become stronger from it, and then they go on to become like the hero. That's exactly what Michelle's doing in this. She starts off running away from stuff, and then by the end of it, she's not going to run away. She's going to go and fight this sort of like alien menace, and she's grown as a person from all this domestic abuse that she's suffered at the hands of all these other people and Howard, and that's sort of like another way you can look at this film.
Yeah, I can see that. That works. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Would you want to see a sequel to this where Michelle is like a badass like resistance fighter?
No, I don't think I would, just because like I think that you need to learn a few lessons from the way J.J. Abrams does things and the way the Cloverfield franchise pans out, that I just think stuff like that is better off in your imagination and just let the mystery be. If we learn anything from The Leftovers, you got to let the mystery be.
That's a very good point. Yeah, no, I think I agree with you with that. Like, I'd like to see maybe like if there was another film following something different and a different group of people, and then she made a cameo, I'd be all on board for that.
Yeah.
But I don't think, given the amount of time it's been now as well, I don't think it would work as another sequel at this point.
I mean, it's so hard to know where this franchise might go, because the third film is like, it's set like quite far in the future, isn't it? There's a big jump in time.
It's set like on a parallel world, isn't it?
Oh, is it?
Yeah, they're like in a space station. I think it's happening in tandem.
Oh, God, that went way over my head.
Yeah, because then like at the end of it, it's kind of like they've opened this dimension thing and they've caused it.
And caused the events of the first two films?
Yeah. I think...
Oh, that's pretty cool. I need to watch that again.
Yeah, maybe we should watch that again. But yeah, and do you remember when Overlord came out?
No, what's that?
So that was another one which everyone thought might be another Cloverfield film, because I think J.J. Abrams was again involved, and it was very hush-hush about what it was about. It was basically kind of like Nazi zombies. But yeah, so like they thought that was going to be another Cloverfield film at one point.
Oh, right. Okay. No, I missed that one. Didn't people think that Super 8 was a Cloverfield film?
I think a few people might have done.
Because that is J.J. Abrams directed that, and it's about a big monster terrorizing a town.
Maybe. I feel like that's very separate though, because it's got a very definite...
Oh, no, it definitely is. I just remember like before it came out.
Yeah, people thinking that it might be before it came out, yeah. Now, it's interesting because I really want to see what happens, if anything, to this franchise, because they could literally go anywhere with it. It's just what kind of stories can you tell where it's still interesting? And I feel like they don't want to. I don't think they should do anything too sort of interlinking universe wise, like all the sort of like the Marvel films or something like that. It needs to be small, self-contained films that have some sort of connection to this wider world.
Yeah, I like this. Apparently a revelation to me that they're all set on the same day, but I guess they've kind of boxed themselves into a corner, haven't they? Like now every film has got to take place on day zero, otherwise it's not sort of following the rules of a Cloverfield film.
And sort of like also with everything going on and with the coronavirus at the moment, what do you think will be the next wave of sci-fi films? Do you think we'll get, after all this is sort of like finished with and everyone's sort of like out away from lockdown and we're sort of through this sort of period of time, what do you think the next wave of sci-fi films will look like? Do you think they'll reflect this sort of time and what we're going through at the moment?
Well, I wonder, like, because I think, I mean, films about like viral outbreaks are a well-established trope, and it's, you know, something that people have been scared of for a long time. I wonder if we might go more down the kind of like this, films about being locked down, films about being trapped in a confined space because of a danger outside. Not, you know, it doesn't have to be a virus or anything like that, but there's a lot of like, because if you think about the kind of headspace that creative people are going to be in, writers, directors, other, you know, filmmakers, they're now locked in their houses and just sort of losing it. A lot of them are going to sort of think beyond those confines because that's just the way they think. But I think also a lot of them are going to be sort of looking at the four walls around them and being like, oh, right, okay, what stories can I think of that take place in this space?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more scripts being made now, a lot more music being made. I think whereas people are being self-contained in their houses, it's the ideal time to have that sort of creative output.
Yeah, or record a podcast over Skype.
Exactly. You've got to do stuff like that. And also our good friend Mike from Evolution of Horror, he's been doing like watch-alongs as well, which I think have gone well. Yeah. So like where they pick a film and they'll watch it at the same time, and then they'll all sort of like tweet along their sort of thoughts and stuff. So I think stuff like that is really good. Like it kind of makes people feel less alone sort of in all this. And the more sort of like community vibes we can get, I think the better, given this sort of like time that we're going through at the moment.
Yeah, get on the phone, pick up your webcams, see each other, talk to each other, all that. We need to keep our eyes out for sci-fi films then that we can do things live, watch them on TV. Yeah,
definitely. And if there's anybody sort of like listening who wants to hear us do like another bonus episode or anything sort of like creative we can do in this time, do let us know. Drop us a tweet, any sort of ideas. We're up for sort of like making more content and sort of like helping you guys out whilst you're stuck at home. So you've got something entertaining, hopefully entertaining, listening to me and Matt chat about sci-fi and whatnot. But yeah, anything we can do, we're on board.
We're probably going to do some more episodes like this. Like James said at the top of the episode, we've got a few in the can. So we're going to carry on with our series on space for the next few episodes. But we don't know how long this is all going to go on for. So it's very likely that we're going to be recording one or two or even more episodes like this. We'll do some bonus episodes. I'd quite like to talk about some of the films that didn't win the poll, some of the lockdown movies that we talked about.
Definitely. Which would be your second favourite out of those ones?
Well, I guess now the poll's over, I can reveal that I actually voted for Cube.
Ah, yes. Cube's brilliant. I love Cube.
So I'd really like to talk about that. But I also just watched A Quiet Place this week. So I'd also be very up for talking about that because that was great.
And like, I mean, it's the last one, so it has to be talked about. But Life Force, I do want to talk about that because, again, it's got a really big cult following and it's a film which I haven't seen. So yeah, at some point, even if it doesn't come up in one of these bonus episodes soon, I'm sure we'll find a way to cover Life Force on the podcast.
Yeah. And plenty of people voted for it, so people know it. It sounds absolutely mad, so I would quite like an excuse to watch it. Talk about it.
Absolutely mad. So, thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you sort of like listening to the podcast, getting in touch, helping us with the poll, and basically being with us for the show.
Yeah, keep yourselves safe out there. Keep yourselves well. We're sending out our love to anyone who is going crazy in lockdown or is unwell. We hope you all get better soon.
Definitely. Remember, wash those hands, stay locked up, stay busy, stay doing stuff when you can. And we will see you very soon.